The struggle for statehood of Palestinian people has long been a central issue in the Middle East. Many Arab states are deeply invested in the Palestinian cause. Palestine has long been a pivotal element in Arab diplomacy and public opinion. The Palestinian question has profoundly shaped the foreign policy perspectives of many, not just Arab states, but also individuals whose perspectives are also rooted in a complex interplay of historical solidarity, political interests, and strategic alliances. Recent happenings in the region emphasize the importance of Palestinian question. These events occurred against the backdrop of a shifting regional order, where several Arab countries, such as Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and the United Arab Emirates, had begun normalizing relations with Israel. It seemed that Saudi Arabia was also on the way to recognize Israel a couple of months ago, before the Arab-Israeli war started once again. However, the October 7 assault by Hamas and Israel's subsequent military operations with catastrophic humanitarian consequences in Gaza have disrupted this trajectory toward normalization. Saudi Arabia has paused its plans, demanding, at least officially, that Israel take concrete steps towards establishing a Palestinian state. This period has also seen heightened public opposition to Israel across Arab world, with widespread protests erupting in Jordan and Morocco, calling for a re-evaluation of existing peace treaties and voicing frustration at the perceived disconnect between governments and their citizen sentiments. This shift in regional dynamics has broader implications, particularly for the United States. Traditionally seen as the closest ally of Israel, the United States has experienced a sharp decline in favorability among Arab publics in the last year. This decline poses challenges for U.S. foreign policy, complicating efforts to resolve the Gaza conflict and to counterbalance Iran and China's growing influence in the region. As the Arab world navigates this turbulent period, the ongoing struggle for Palestinian statehood remains a central issue, continuing to shape and define the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. Understanding the impact of such events on the Arab foreign policy attitudes requires analysis of the factors at play. By examining dynamics of public opinion across the Arab world, my paper aims to explore how these factors shape and are shaped by perceptions of international actors like the US and China. In my analysis, I use data from the largest and most comprehensive regional public opinion survey, actually two of them, the Arab Barometer and Arab Opinion Index. To be precise, I draw on data from the Arab Barometer Wave 7 conducted in 2022 in 12 countries, alongside data from the Arab Opinion Index, which was conducted this wave that I use in 2020 in 13 different countries. These surveys provide extensive coverage of various Arab regions, offering valuable insight into shifting public sentiments and political attitudes. So, to empirically test how various global and regional foreign political policy attitudes interact with opinions on Palestinian question, I turn to statistical analysis with first of Arab Barometer data. In the focus of my analysis was the question on normalization of relations between Arab states and Israel, namely, to what extent do respondents favor or oppose that process, for which you can see descriptives here in the slide. Specifically, I employed a combination of correlation and regression analysis to assess the relationship between these attitudes and foreign policy preferences. Of course, I also included religiosity as a predictor in my analysis to explore the association between the opinions on the normalization of relations with Israel and religiosity, as well as the perceptions on foreign policy from different global and regional actors. I utilize Spearman's rank correlation coefficient to measure the strength and direction of relationship between variables. When it comes to perception regarding the foreign policy, response options range from very good to very bad on a 5-point scale, but distribution of answers is uneven to a large extent in some cases. Attitudes toward three main global powers, the United States, Russia, and China were included, in addition to two non-Arab regional powers in the Middle East, Turkey and Iran. As for religiosity, respondents were able to describe whether they consider themselves as religious, somewhat religious, or not religious. The correlation coefficient between religiosity and the extent of support for normalization with Israel among Muslim respondents is weak, but has a statistically significant positive relationship. As religiosity increases, support for normalization increases slightly. For Christians, the correlation coefficient is higher, showing the stronger positive relationship. More religious Christian respondents are more likely to support normalization of relations with Israel compared to Muslim respondents. For both religious groups, there is a highly significant correlation between the main variable and assessment of American foreign policy. For Muslims, there is a moderate positive relationship between favorable views of US foreign policy and support for normalization, while for Christian, correlation is much stronger. For attitudes toward Russian foreign policy, there is no meaningful relationship for Muslim respondents, while for Christians, there is indication of a weak but significant positive relationship. This suggests that Christians who view Russian foreign policy positively are slightly more likely to support normalization of relations with Israel, though this is not pronounced as is the case in United States foreign policy. Christians also show a stronger positive relationship between favorable views of Chinese foreign policy and support for normalization with Israel compared to Muslims, although this trend is positive and highly statistically significant among adherents of both religions. This comparative analysis highlights that religiosity and foreign policy perceptions influence attitudes toward normalization with Israel differently between Muslims and Christian respondents, with Christians generally showing stronger correlations, especially in relation to US and Chinese foreign policy. To further investigate how... to further investigate how perceptions of foreign policy and other covariates influence the likelihood of supporting or opposing normalization with Israel, as a crucial question for Palestinian cause, I conducted binary logistic regression. For this purpose, the dependent variable was recoded into binaries who strongly favor on one side and strongly oppose and oppose on the other. As for independent variables, perceptions of foreign policies of earlier mentioned countries were also recoded to binary variables, with those responses which assessed foreign policy of these actors as neither good nor bad omitted from analysis. It's also worth noting that the level of religiosity was treated as an ordinal variable, respecting the inherent order in responses, while additional covariates were included as control variables, namely demographic variables such as age, gender, education, and subjective income. Here I also followed the comparative approach with separate analysis for Muslim and Christian respondents. When it comes to Muslims, the results suggest that the predictors explain around 8.4 of the variation in attitudes toward normalization with Israel, which is quite low, and the R-square value is much higher for Christian respondents, and the model there explains far more, 35.7% of the variation in attitudes toward normalization, which indicates much stronger predictive power for Christian respondents compared to Muslim respondents. Okay, let's move forward to significant predictors, respondents who, I hope there will be a slide as well. So respondents who positively rate US foreign policy are significantly more likely to favor normalization with Israel. The odds of supporting normalization increase with a higher rating of US foreign policy, just as with Muslim respondents. Christians who rate US foreign policy positively are more likely to favor normalization, with odds increasing by more or less the same amount for both religions denominations. As for Russian foreign policy, among the Muslims, negative relationship is observed. The more positively Russian foreign policy is rated, the less likely respondents are to favor normalization with Israel. This was not a significant predictor in the Christian subsample. On the other hand, Christians who view Chinese foreign policy favorably are far more likely to support normalization, while this variable did not have a significant effect among Muslim respondents. Favorability of Turkish and Iranian foreign policies were not significant predictors for either religious groups. Among Christians, religiosity is a significant positive predictor of support for normalization. Being religious compared to being non-religious is a significant positive predictor. On the other hand, being somewhat religious does not significantly affect the likelihood of supporting normalization of relations with Israel. Also note that religiosity did not significantly affect Muslims' attitudes. All this said suggests that while US policy shapes attitudes across both religious groups, other geopolitical alignments and personal factors vary significantly between Muslim and Christians in the context of normalization of relations with Israel. By employing both correlation and regression analysis, I aim to provide a comprehensive examination of how religiosity and various foreign policy attitudes, together with control variables, relate to opinions on the Palestinian question. This approach ensures that we capture both direct and indirect effects of this variable, offering a detailed picture of the complex interplay between global and regional foreign policy perceptions and public opinion. In addition to the great. Now you got it when I finished. In addition to previous data, I also analyzed data from Arab Opinion Index from 2020. Here, my focus was the next slide on a question in which that one, the pie. Yeah, perfect. On question in which respondents had to choose whether they think the Palestinian cause is a cause for all Arabs and not for the Palestinian people alone, or on the other hand, the cause of the Palestinians solely, and they alone should work to resolve it. As you can see, the vast majority considers Palestine to be a pan-Arab cause. So to investigate how perceptions of foreign policy and religiosity influence the attitude on whether Palestinian question is pan-Arab or solely Palestinian cause, I conducted once again a binary logistic regression with similar independent variables as was the case in previous model, namely assessment of foreign policy of several global and regional actors towards respondent country was taken into account. Once again, attitudes were included on three main global powers, the United States, Russia, and China, in addition to two non-Arab regional powers in the Middle East, Turkey and Iran. But here, analysis also incorporated perceptions on two European powers, Germany and France. These variables were also recoded to binary, so they differ between either positive or negative attitudes. Here, the survey questionnaire didn't offer a neutral response, Yet also no cases were excluded from the analysis, and regression model also included the level of religiosity, which was treated as ordinal variable with additional covariates, including age, gender, education, and subjective income, same as before. As you can see, Christian model, next slide, please. Christian model shows a significantly better fit with higher R-square values, indicating that it explains a greater proportion of areas in the outcome. The Muslim model's lower values suggest basically pretty non-effective model fit here. For Muslim perceptions of US foreign policy, I'm not sure, do you see actually the numbers here? It's 0.034, I think, for Muslims, and 0.182 for Christians. So I was saying that for Muslim perceptions of US foreign policy do not significantly impact the outcome, while for Christians, a more negative view of US foreign policy is strongly associated with an increased likelihood of favoring the Palestinian cause as a cause for all Arabs. For Russian foreign policy, Christians who hold more positive views are significantly more likely to support the Palestinian cause. In contrast, Muslims do not show a significant relationship between their views on Russian foreign policy and their support for the Palestinian question as a broader Arab cause. When it comes to Chinese foreign policy, Muslims with more positive views are significantly more likely to support the Palestinian cause. Among Christians, although the effect is not statistically significant, there is a trend suggesting that the more positive views of Chinese foreign policy might be associated with a decreased likelihood of supporting the Palestinian cause. Regarding foreign policy of European powers, both groups do not show any significant impacts of views on the likelihood of supporting Palestine as a pan-Arab cause. With Turkish foreign policy, Muslims here are more with more positive views are significantly more likely to support the Palestinian cause, while for Christians there is no significant impact of perceptions. And lastly, perceptions of Iranian foreign policy do not significantly impact support for either of these two groups. For both groups, higher religiosity is associated with a greater likelihood of viewing the Palestinian cause as a cause for all Arabs. The effect is more pronounced and significant among Muslims compared to Christians, especially for those who are very religious. In general, these differences highlight how cultural, religious, and socioeconomic factors can influence perception of Palestinian cause differently across religious groups. But what probably accounts the most for the difference between Muslims and Christians is the fact that most of Christian respondents in these samples come from Lebanon. Therefore, Lebanese Arabs may hold different attitudes than the majority of Arabs, especially due to the unique domestic and geopolitical circumstances in their country. Lebanon's complex political landscape and its role in the regional conflict can significantly shape Lebanese perspectives on international issues like the Palestinian question. Furthermore, since both the Arab Barometer and the Arab Opinion Index are conducted across a wide range of Arab countries, from the Gulf and Mashriq on the east to the Nile Valley and Maghreb on the west, there are likely to be significant variations in attitudes among these diverse contexts. These regional differences underscore the importance of considering local circumstances when interpreting perceptions of Palestinian cause across different populations. Be it as it may, this study provides an examination of how various foreign policy attitudes and religiosity intersect with opinions on the normalizations of relations between Arab states and Israel, as well as a broader perception of the Palestinian question. In conclusion, the study emphasizes the need to account for these various cultural, religious, and other factors when analyzing opinions on these issues. It also illustrates the importance of considering regional variations in attitudes, reflecting the broader complexities of Arab public opinion on this critical issue for all the Arabs. Further research should for sure continue to explore these dimensions to deepen our understanding of how global and regional foreign policies influence public sentiments on Palestinian questions. I will conclude with this. Thank you.